special meeting, regular meeting on Monday, November 1st, 2021. The time is 6:01. And I call this meeting to order and ask that you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the clerk please take roll call?
Yes, good evening. Member Anderson? Member Cuesta?
Present.
Member Russell?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Present.
Member Ward?
Here.
Member Wink?
Present.
Mayor Olson?
Present.
Let the, 6 present and 1 absent, the 1 absent being Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. Our first item tonight is a study session topic. Our Director of Community Development, Brad Power, is here, along with several of his staff, Planning Manager Wade Burkholder, Senior Planner Brook Bell, to present and discuss an update on the Title 16 amendments and the work on the UDC Steering Committee. Actually, looks like we simply have Planning Manager Wade Burkholder here. All right, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor Olson, members of council. Tonight is our first quarterly update for the Code Next project, the rewrite of Title 16, the Unified Development Code. And we do have a short presentation this evening. I would like to introduce one of our consultants from Gould Evans, Chris Brewster. He is the project manager, primary project manager, assisting us with this project thus far. So Chris is virtual, and he will present the presentation to you all, and then we'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Do you have my screen?
We do have it on the other screens too, if you want to let the others advance it for you and just keep your video on. It's up to you, though. You don't need to share your screen, in other words, is what I'm saying, unless you want to be in the control seat. That's fine, too.
I'll go with let you all advance it on your end then. As Wade mentioned, my name is Chris Brewster. With Gould Evans, we're based out of Kansas City. We're an architecture and design firm. We have offices in Kansas City, Phoenix, San Francisco, Lawrence, Kansas, and New Orleans. I work in our planning group, which does mainly municipal planning for cities. We do planning, urban design, and development codes, and I lead our development code group. I've been at Gould Evans for a little over 20 years, primarily focusing on development codes. Prior to that, I worked at a city here in the Kansas City metro area as a staff attorney. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm supported by a team of planners and urban designers that will be working on the project. And also with us is Ayers and Associates. They're a team member. They have a large Front Range presence. Matt Ashby is going to be one of our lead facilitators. I believe he's on the call, but not a panelist. But Matt's group, we team with frequently on development codes. Matt's a former planning director for the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we actually partnered with him when he was the director there, and we did Cheyenne's development code. And since he's gone to Ayers, we've teamed with them. Their group helps support planning, public facilitation. They have an engineering practice, and then they also have economic development specialists. So we feel we have all of the possible issues that we could encounter on this development code project in our team, and we're excited to be teaming with you all on this exciting project. The next slide should show our philosophy, our planning group. This is what philosophy we've developed over the 20 years I've been at Gould Evans, and it's really based on making sure the development code is a good decision-making tool for not only public officials, staff, but also those who are regulated by it. So we do spend a lot of time working on the organization and making the code simpler and easier to understand. So a logical framework and organization structure is one of the most important things we will leave the city with, because we know the code will be amended over time. And we want to make sure it maintains a long, useful life by knowing where and when we need to adjust things. Other than that, we want to incorporate lots of plain language, graphics, and tables, making the standards easier to use. We will also use a lot of purpose and intent statements to connect the plan to the code to your plans, which I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. But the bottom line is we want to make sure that we're connecting this development code to the planning work that you've done. So that's the Englewood Forward Comprehensive Plan. That's other policies and area plans we began looking at. And it's also the time that was spent doing the assessment of your development code that gave us a lot of good direction as well. So those are some of the things we're going to be incorporating into this project. The next slide talks a little bit about regulating form and type. So that's our approach. We do, as I mentioned, we're a design firm. We do try to connect standards to the scale and types of places you envision. And so we do look at codes a little bit differently. So when we talk about regulating form and type, we look at it in this order. Streetscapes first. The public realm is going to dictate a lot of what types of standards should go in one place versus another. And so that begins with the streetscape design and the public infrastructure that determines how a place should evolve, and your comprehensive plan supports that idea. And from there we progress to the frontages where development meets the street, and then more into the private sector elements of building scale and mass. And then lastly, building design and uses. Not that any of those are lesser important than the other, but that's the way we progress to get the code to be more of a design solution than it is just a collection of standards. So the next slide talks about flexibility and certainty. It's another part of our approach. When I first started working at Gould Evans, a lot of development codes looked like the top. It was just kind of black and white. The plan was the plan, the regulations were the regulations, and then when you ran into problems, you either looked at a different application process or you went for a variance. But the more our planning profession has explored design-oriented approaches, or as we like to think of it, converting your code to a system of how we build and why. We want to use these kind of approach of shades of gray. Not that the standards are shades of gray, but that we connect them to the plan with those purpose, intent statements, and design objectives I mentioned. And then on the back end, implementing it through some clear decision-making criteria, having alternatives when they're warranted, and granting exceptions when things aren't working as intended. And then lastly, the variance as a last resort. So that iterative process helps us convert your code into a better decision-making tool, even while we're improving the certainty and the expectations of the development code. So it's just a lens that we use to look at things as we try to solve problems that we're going to encounter under this code. The next slide talks about some of the objectives that came from you all, from your plan and your RFP. So these are the goals. These are kind of our marching orders. A lot of it aligns with our approach to code. So it's things that we expected to do anyway, modernizing and making the code more user-friendly, giving some better review criteria, improving the flexibility, promoting infill and redevelopment. Obviously, Englewood as a largely built out community, it's different than communities that are growing. So we're going to be looking at things a lot more strategically of how development and redevelopment happens. And we know that brings a whole set of different issues, and we're used to dealing with those in our firm. We know that housing in the Front Range, like all communities, but particularly in the Front Range, is a really key issue that's going to drive a lot of what we do. We've already started discussing walkability and sustainability issues. Obviously, with a very large transit investment in your community, we view walkability as the first step of transit. All transit trips begin and end with a person on foot, and so improving walkability is going to really best leverage that investment in your strategic place in the metro area. And then the last part, a lot of what our firm, our team, and Matt particularly is on for is to facilitate all of these through some discussions and public meetings on a lot of these topics. And I'll get into that in a little bit as well as our approach. The next slide should be a picture of our organization of our team. Going from and this is how we commonly organize teams to address the development code. We do view public participation and engagement for development codes a little bit differently than a typical planning process. The reason is regulations are very technical, sometimes complex, and so we want to make sure we're talking to people and engaging them at a level where they can influence decisions and not necessarily asking them to review sections of development code. So this is an approach we take where The project team deals with really the nuts and bolts of the code, and the technical committee, which is going up the chart, is key staff and departments that are affected mostly by the code. And sometimes it can include outsiders who use the code frequently as well. But we meet with those groups a little less frequently. But those two groups are really the people that, wordsmith and go over all the sections. The next level up is the steering committee, which is assembled and was appointed by you all that we are engaging to dive a little deeper into specific topics. So we are facilitating some discussions with them that I'll cover in a moment as well. And then lastly, keeping elected and appointed officials up to date and engaged as little or as much as they want to be. So we will be talking to you all in the periodic updates, but also when we get to drafting the codes, you'll be seeing some of the drafts and options coming before you in work sessions, and then obviously the formal public adoption process that needs to go before Planning Commission and City Council. So that's a little bit into how we layer the engagement. The next slide should have our schedule. And kind of playing off that previous slide, one thing to note is we really won't begin drafting anything until we're about halfway through the project. So at the turn of the calendar year is probably when we think that some sections will be able to start drafting. But right now we're in a phase of exploring what the issues are, discussing those with people, getting a familiarity with their planning policies and where some of the problems and solutions might lurk in your code. And then from there, we're about to kick, as you'll see in a moment, we're about to dive a little bit deeper into what we call the align phase. So we're going to begin to align the public policies and directions with some of the strategies. And so that's really our larger engagement piece that we've already started with the steering committee. We will plan to engage the broader public a little more towards the turn of the year. And then that engagement piece actually kind of continues through the drafting process as we review and draft codes. The next slide does talk about the...
We just lost your sound.
Do you have me back now?
There we do.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that heads up. I hit the wrong button here. We did a kickoff meeting that was very similar to this meeting with the steering committee on September 8th, where Wade and his team introduced us. We were fortunate that obviously staff has been working with them for a much longer time with the code assessment and some of their preliminary discussions. So we really kind of hit the ground rolling. And from there, we decided to begin a series of listening sessions with them on some of the code assessment that was performed a little over a year ago. Came away with 5 priority topics that we have been engaging the committee with. On the 22nd and 5th of October, we discussed parking and how that affects walkability and walkable development patterns, and a bunch of different strategies and viewpoints on parking standards. The last meeting we had on October 19th, we began to talk about street design. I mentioned that a lot of our cues from what we regulate begins with the street designs. And so we got some input on that. And then tomorrow night, we'll be engaging them on the topic of sustainability and what sustainability means to the development code. And then that will set us up for the last 3, which are all really based on housing. And it's, as I mentioned, we know and understand housing is a big issue. And so we've broken that topic out into 3 elements: neighborhood character, housing options, what range of housing types we should be accounted for in the code and where and how. And then lastly, housing attainability. I know planning staff has had before you the applications for the Colorado grants that are available. So that's one of the reasons we left attainability to the end there, because by that time we'll know a little bit more on the success of that grant. So those are all our preliminary discussions with the steering committee. And as I mentioned, from there, we will develop a broader outreach and engagement strategy for going out to either stakeholder groups, the general public, different groups on all of those topics, and we will plan to do that engagement in January through June. Some of those things that we may do, this is a list of some events that we typically do and we're prepared to do them. Obviously, the Englewood Engage website that staff has directed us to keep building on is a great tool for information. Quarterly updates to you all will be included in that. I I mentioned the focus groups and stakeholder groups and interviews that we plan on doing in January through June. Public open houses. We find development codes are a lot easier to engage with people in an open house format. So that's what we typically plan on doing, but we're adaptable to any strategy that works well. But we plan on engaging the broader public at least 3 different times. Some of the things that we do through that are either demonstration projects, things where we'll look at a particular area and how the development code impacts it, perhaps looking at case studies and projects that are relevant to Englewood from other places and how they might fit in. So there's a whole host of strategies that we will use as we engage the public and discuss the implications of updates to the development code. And the last 3 are more about how we will engage you all and once we begin drafting solutions for the code and getting to the final product. So that's a quick overview of our approach and what we've been up to so far. And that's really kind of all I had as an introduction, but be happy to open it up and hear from any thoughts from you all, any questions you have of our group and our approach, or any goals and objectives you have for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, council? Comments? This is the time that you want us to do this, right? Looks like everybody's happy with it. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. I just have a few questions. So, especially at this point in time, in regards to the steering committee, do you solicit feedback from the steering committee and try to engage some of the things that they're asking for too? Or is it more of an educational exercise to educate the steering committee?
Yeah, that's a great question. And our answer is typically both. When we do these projects, it depends on the makeup of the committee. I will say my impressions from the committee thus far are, 1, they have a very deep understanding of development issues and the code, and 2, they have a very diverse set of opinions. That's what we've observed, which is how we actually like it, because it means we have we'll be presented with a lot of challenges. We'll be presented with things that we need to determine a direction to decide on, but we also feel like we probably have the pulse of the community through that group's representation. Again, that's my initial impression. I would leave it to staff to elaborate further on it. They know them better and have been dealing with that group. But to answer your question, we expect to do a little bit of both. I think your committee is a little more on taking their ideas and pushing them further because they have a lot of good ideas that are already well thought out.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just on the public, public open houses, by the time you get to those to engage the public, will it be to get feedback from the public in what they want? And could the public change it, or by that time, is it already set in stone and it's more marketing to the public what we intend to do?
Yes, that's another good question. The reason we have 3 is because each one kind of gets us a little further into that. So the first one we anticipate being more about a summary of the topics and issues that we explored with the steering committee. And we won't necessarily be looking for direction or solutions from that because it's not, we don't want to be drafting codes by public opinion. But what we will do is take the main themes and topics that are emerging, and we already have 5 of them from your code assessment, confirm that those are the things that people feel are most crucial and most instrumental to the community, and also confirm that those are things that should be addressed by the development code. A lot of times we have planning policies or goals and objectives that aren't necessarily best implemented by regulations, and maybe we have to set those aside. But we want to really be focusing that first meeting on, do we have the right issues? What's the kind of pulse of the community on those topics, and what direction will we be pushing in? And where can we expect opposition, to be honest with you? Sometimes the public, we may know we have to achieve certain things, but we want to know where opposition or controversy will come from, and we expect to engage that. So that's the kind of the first meeting. The second meeting would be more substantive, where we won't necessarily, again, be asking them for how should we regulate this, but we'll explore options and strategies, those case studies and things that I mentioned that let people understand the implication of codes and the choices that are made. So something that allows them to really gain an understanding of the impacts and consequences of going one direction or the other. And then the last one would be, we feel like we would take that technical committee and our core team and really use that expertise to draft the code. And the last one is more about introducing those ideas, not necessarily in a sales pitch, but letting people know where things are changing and why. And they won't always agree with it, but we do want them to always understand how we got to that point and the choices we made.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Others? Councilmember Wink, I know I can't see your hand, so if you have something, go ahead, chime in. Mayor Pro Tem Steeri.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Brewster, for the presentation. I guess my question is, in terms of the summaries that you're going to be providing us, I believe you may have answered part of this, but you're going to be providing us and the public a description or at least an understanding of why we're leaning in a certain direction with the new development codes. Will you also tie in some of the feedback that we've been hearing from constituents on, I know that there's been conversations regarding this or regarding short-term rentals or regarding urban lots, something along those lines where it kind of says, these are the concerns that we've been hearing from citizens within the city of Englewood, but this is the reason why we are stating this. Is that going to be part of the summary that we receive at a certain point?
Yes, in general, yes. Depending how many of those issues and what specific ones we elevate to the top will be a matter of prioritizing. But yes, that's typically how we like to approach it. You mentioned a couple of issues that we've already heard rumblings about that we might group into a topic on housing options, and so we will present information that explores those topics and gives potential strategies. We'll present information that begins to connect some of those trade-offs, and then lastly, when we actually come to a solution that's drafted, we want to do two key things. First, connected to where your regulations are at today on that topic. That's one of the things we often find, particularly when this gets into the public discourse. You may have standards on a topic already, and we don't want to, it's a matter of what's changing to what degree and why. So we will spend a lot of time connecting it back to your current code and then connecting it to what things are changing and where that direction came from. Did the direction come from looking at what other communities were doing? Did the direction come from a specific policy where Englewood has said, no, we need to push in this direction? Or did the change come from an industry best practice that we know to achieve certain results that we just need to change the way we're doing things? So those are the types of things we'll look at. Exactly how we connect those dots kind of depends on the issues we encounter, but I think that the gist of your question is, will the things you've been hearing from constituents be reflected in this code? And yes, in some way or form they will. To what degree certain topics get more attention than others will be part of what our engagement process is about.
Thank you, Mr. Brewster.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'll ask. My first is on the setup of the open houses. It's been my observation, and others can chime in from council. They've had their own too. It seems like when we have just a free-for-all kind of open house, people get frustrated that they don't all get to hear the same conversations. And I've heard from folks often say, could we start out with at least a presentation of what's happening, what's in the room, what to be looking for, and what the key issues of information they're needing that night. Otherwise, it seems like people go from one poster to the next, and it really isn't cohesive enough, and the feedback I don't think is as deep as it could be. So that's just one. I don't know if other council members agree. I see a few shaking their heads. So I would be careful about how you structure those. And I don't know if that's a normal way you've done them before or how you were thinking.
No, that's a common concern, and it's very helpful. I'm glad you reminded our group of that, because yeah, we will be sensitive to that issue. And it may be that's why I said we aren't sold that every one of those engagements will be an open house. We will look to engage in different ways as well, based on your all's experience with the public. We often, your constituents better than we do, and so we want to build on what's worked in your community as well.
Great. The other question I would have is, could a neighborhood that's sizable pull together their own event and invite you all? I can think of some areas like some of the medical district or wellness district overlays, and some others that have some unique characteristics that they're concerned about.
Yeah, I think we would certainly be open to that. I know we have, within our scope, we typically run into topics that we need to carve off and engage with either smaller groups or specialists or people that are more involved in a particular issue. So oftentimes those are topic-based, but they certainly could be geographic-based as well. So we would certainly work with staff to figure out if that's how we want to use that part of our scope.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Questions or comments, feedback? Seeing none? Good. I guess it's a great quarterly update we just got, or the second, I guess, of the kickoff, right? Thanks for your input. Do you have more? No.
Nope, that's
that was it,
Thank
right?
you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Get my agenda back. All right, agenda item 5 tonight is consideration of the minutes of the previous session. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting of October 16th, 2021.
I move to approve the minutes of the October 16th meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Ward. Please vote. Oh, you have a question. I'm sorry I didn't ask right off the bat. Go
Well,
ahead.
that's okay. I mean, I did contact the city clerk's office this afternoon, and there was a correction on the vote on 11B1, and it was corrected. So
So the one that's currently online is correct?
the one that's online
Yeah,
is correct
okay, that's the
also.
one I have.
Correct.
Okay. So it's now correct, and it was a vote number?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a vote number.
Right.
So do we have to amend that,
I don't
or
believe
do we not have to?
so.
Okay,
If it was a technical
okay.
typo, is that right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
believe so, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, so we can vote. All right, please vote.
Member Cuesta,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Mayor Olson.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Agenda item 6 is our appointments, communications, proclamations, and recognitions. And tonight, our city attorney Niles is going to, via Zoom, acknowledge and introduce our assistant city attorney, Kaitlin Parker, who is sitting here physically with us while Tamara is online. Thank you.
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I have a hoarse voice, so hopefully hopefully I can introduce Kate appropriately. Thank you for allowing us to recognize Kaitlin Parker this evening. She is the new assistant city attorney in the city attorney's office, one of 2, and we will introduce our second assistant city attorney at a future meeting. I just wanted to give you some background on Kate's qualifications because she brings such a wealth of knowledge and experience to the city attorney's office. She's licensed to practice in Colorado in both state courts and federal court. Prior to joining the city attorney's office, she was an attorney at Nathan Devon Mayer, where she practiced civil litigation and counseled clients on a broad range of matters, including insurance, law enforcement, civil rights, and premises liability. She has also provided legal representation to public entities, officials, and employees, as well as to insurance carriers and insureds. She graduated from the University of Denver Stern College of Law, where she served as vice president and treasurer for the Law Native American Law Students Association and participated in the Tribal Wills Project, providing pro bono legal services for tribal members. She also has significant experience in the civil litigation clinic at the law school. And she provided legal services for low-income clients in temporary restraining order and eviction cases, and is a mediator in the mediation clinic, where she provided pro bono mediation services. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and has an Environmental and Natural Resources Law Certificate from the Stern College of Law, which of course, given the City of Englewood's water portfolio and natural resources issues we face, is a tremendous asset for us. For the City of Englewood, she'll provide legal representation in litigation matters, legal services and advice to the police department, South Platte Renew, utilities, and to other various issues. And again, I want to thank her for being there in person today. It's unfortunate that her first meeting there, I'm not also present to introduce her in person, but she's been a great asset to us so far, and she will continue to be so for the City of Englewood.
Thank you and welcome. Glad to have you on board. It sounds like a great background that our city can really benefit from. So thanks for choosing to work here as well. Thanks very much. We'll move on to, unless there are further comments, I think not, right? We will move on to our recognition of scheduled public comment. So the deadline to sign up for this, to speak for a scheduled public comment, is Wednesday by 5 p.m. prior to the meeting through the city clerk's office. This is an opportunity for the public to address city council, and there's an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner. Council may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue. Please limit your presentation to 5 minutes in this section, and written materials for presentation to council may be submitted to the city clerk. We have two folks who have signed up tonight in this section. The first one is Joseph DeSimone, an Englewood resident, here to address council regarding zip codes and taxes. And I believe you're in the room. So come on up to the table here and just put on the little light there and give us your name and your address or cross streets of where you live. And then tonight, Councilmember Wink will be responding to. That's fine. It's not something people do very commonly. Okay. So just pull that up to you, and then we'll be able to hear you better.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm a resident of Englewood. I've been here for 46 years in the same place.
Can you give us your name and your cross streets of where you live?
First name is Joseph, last name is DeSimone, and I live in the 3300 block of South Lafayette Street, 4 houses from Floyd. And my question is, it kind of bugs me a little bit. I don't know if you have ever seen the commercials on TV about Medicare. I mean, I'm 77 years old, my wife is 78, and we are both on a fixed income, and they tell you that you can get all these perks and everything, and we can add money back to our Social Security and everything. I have checked with them several different times, and they tell me that I'm not eligible because of the zip code that I live in. And I understand that the zip code that I live in is Cherry Hills, and I do not live in Cherry Hills. I never have lived in Cherry Hills, and I want to know why we have a Cherry Hills address, zip code.
Is that your question tonight?
And then also, too, I want to know, well, I found out something else I didn't know tonight. Also, does that have anything to do with our taxes in Englewood? Are we taxed from Englewood, or are we taxed for Cherry Hills?
All right, thank you. So we won't answer the question now, but some might have questions here, but we'll have you sit back down, and then after the next person comes, Councilmember Wink will either try to answer it or we'll direct it to someone on staff who could answer it for you. Okay. It's a perplexing
I have
zip
one
code issue.
Okay,
third
thing.
Question.
When you were talking about Englewood development, I'm all for that and everything, but I would like to know what they're planning on doing with the corner of Old Hamden and Lafayette Street, where Bullock's Mortuary used to be. We have got so much traffic coming down our street now, it is, and then if they put in another high rise or whatever they're planning on putting there, we're going to have that much more traffic. And I'm just wondering what they're planning on doing.
All right.
If you could answer that question for me, or
Thank you. Thank you. We don't do it right now. We don't have a dialogue, but we will have someone speak to it or get information to inform you after the meeting as well. So thank
Okay.
you for coming tonight.
All right, thank you.
But stick around. You can probably get some answers in a minute. I know it's a strange process, but the next person up is Mr. Stephen Kelly, an Englewood resident here to address council regarding off-leash dog park data.
Hi,
Welcome.
Steve Kelly, Delaware and Radcliffe, and it's actually just the process, the whole off-leash study. Confucius said a long time ago, when you're having a dialogue, you must use correct language. I'm going to use some language, it has to do with ethics, lie of omission, tribalism. Those are words that, might come across as harsh, but I believe they're appropriate. The post-mortem on this whole thing, and there's a second vote tonight, but the task force mediator, when he talked about it, he said it needs to be a fair process. Well, it was not. There was no data suggesting a need for change when we were meeting for months. It had yet to been manufactured, in my opinion. South of 285, around 80% decrease in the off-leash space. Cushing Park was denied for an expansion, so was Emerson. Why? From what I've heard, it was just personal interests. The ordinance, I don't know the history of ordinances, but it seemed to be a record time from the proposal to now, a total of 2 meetings. Has there ever been, another question, an ordinance with 0 public input? Also, the language does not contain important details of the resolution, which was approved by council. Why close or limit any park for off-leash? Safety, but there was no documented problems. Fear, people did express fear. Parks had a solution in need of a problem, but the problem got bigger. Council did not act in an ethical manner. Council went beyond its bounds in directing code enforcement to take actions. That's an ethics violation, in my opinion. And they did it to create evidence for a problem. More ethics problems. The city-paid mediator writes letters to council members asking them not to listen to citizens. Huge problem, in my opinion, since you're elected by the citizens. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, in a question coming back to me, asking me what were these things, 127 violations at Jason Park, what were they, if not violations? Well, I'll say the whole thing was a lie of omission. If council members knew that those numbers were inflated compared to all the other parks over all the other years and said nothing, that's a lie of omission. Representative Ward asked for this, I'll call it cooked data. Representative Anderson then used it to suggest there were problems. Tribalism was something else that I saw in Representative Anderson's answer when you were discussing the changing the hours. He said maybe sometime in the winter someone might want to go to the off-leash space after school or whenever, and therefore off-leash citizens can't be there. They're getting pushed off a space because someone else might want to be there. That's not something that this city should be endorsing. There is a concept called precedence that pertains to good business and good governance. A long-standing program or procedure should not be changed without precedence indicating a need for change. Personal interests, fear, tribalism are not valid reasons to change a successful program, especially in its limitation. Only citizens can prevent the institutionalization of this type of bad governance. Hopefully, tomorrow's election will begin a process of change in this city. Then in 2 years, and then in 4 years. And along those lines, we need a strong mayor's position. We do not need council socials, as suggested by some of the representatives. It takes citizens out of the loop, and I think it fosters cronyism and nepotism. We need oversight for Englewood government. When council campaign materials say they support employees first, then who leads this city? Citizens are certainly removed. The entire off-leash program, well, the study of it, and what may be the next vote to ordinance it, is an example of bad governance.
All right, thank you for coming tonight. Are there questions from anyone? Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kelly, do you happen to have an email that shows that we were directed by the moderator to not listen to the public?
Yes.
Can you share that with the city council? Because I'm unaware of any email showing as much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Next is agenda item A, which is our recognition of unscheduled public comment. If you'd like to sign up to speak for this time in the upcoming city council meetings, you do it on the night of, as you come in the room. If registering to speak virtually, you receive a unique personalized invitation by email to join the meeting. That's true for both forms of this. So just a reminder that you can definitely participate online. I think I'll move on to then who is online tonight, or who is here.
We have two that are in person and no one online. Our first speaker tonight is Ed Kahn.
All right, Mr. Kahn, thank you. Come up and state your name and your address or cross streets of where you live.
Hi, my name is Ed Kahn, K-A-H-N. I live at 4801 South Sherman Street. The only reason why I'm addressing the council today is I addressed them 2 weeks ago, and I'm giving you an update. After having not good communication with the city, nothing was really, in my opinion, was done until Thursday of last week, which is why I could not get on the docket. I am letting the council know that I am not happy with the communication I've had with the city manager. We differ on a few facts. To that, I brought what I consider proof of who's calling me and when and why and how, just if I needed to corroborate my story. I just would like to let the city council know that waiting almost 2 weeks to address this situation when the city manager fully supports the fact that it's not the city's problem. It shouldn't take more than 48 hours for the city to figure out whose problem it really is, speak with me, and at least put me in touch with the people who need to be contacted. Thank you very much for your time. I'm simply giving you this update that, in my opinion, nothing has been done in 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next.
All right, our next speaker this evening is Colleen Dickerson. I'm sorry, C.A. Dickerson.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Colleen Dickerson. I usually go by C-Ann because everybody screws up my name. I live in District 1, close to Bates Logan Park. The proposed ordinance that's coming up for second reading tonight to put park rules in 7-1A-3, animal control at large, is extremely misplaced. In 2019, council, at the urging of the city manager at that time and code enforcement, approved an ordinance added to the ordinance Title 11-4-2C Parks, Authority to Govern. 11-4-2C 2 and 3 defines hours of parks and requires that dogs be on a leash except in designated and posted off-leash area. This was considered necessary to give park rules concerning dogs the force of law. Park rules deemed justified and necessary should amend the existing ordinances in Title 11-4-2C 1 through 5 and enforced from there. The city manager or his designee is responsible for the enforcement of all municipal ordinances, including Title 11, Chapter 4 parks, and have, by ordinance, the force of law. I urge the council to reconsider this ordinance and to put justified and necessary additional park rules in 11-4 2C, where the rules are already. So far, we haven't seen any justification for any addition. But for one clear reason, it doesn't belong in 71A-3 animal control. It belongs in Title 11, Chapter 4, Parks. And if you need it, I have Title 11 here. And it very clearly gives the city manager and/or his designee authority to enforce park rules. That's where any park rule belongs, Title 11, not as you've got it in Title 7-1A-3.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Dickerson? Seeing none, appreciate you coming tonight. I think there's a third person maybe online. No? All right. No one else here in the room either. All right. Member Wink, you get to take a chance on all these. and I actually would prefer to have Manager Lewis to speak to some on the taxes and the post office at some point if you want help on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for being here tonight. Mr. DeSimone, zip codes actually correspond to federal post offices, and we, the city of Englewood, actually serve a huge part of the metro area, especially unincorporated Arapahoe County. It is a little bit confusing. As far as I know, we do not collect Cherry Hills taxes, wonderful as I believe that might be for us. As I know it, we do not have that luxury. I know we are developing Old Hamden and Lafayette, but I think I have to defer to the city manager for the exact status of that development project. I remember that even our member Anderson had promoted us sort of revitalizing that area some weeks back. And also City Manager Lewis, if you don't mind speaking also to any more facts or that can support Mr. DeSimone's questions about the zip codes and, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Wink. I'll do my best. I did offline ask his exact address and was able to look it up. He is within the city of Englewood limits. He is in the Cherry Hills School District, I believe. So that should be the only kind of confusion, that he is taxed by the Cherry Hills School District instead of Englewood Schools, but he is taxed by, pays property tax to the city of Englewood according to the tax records on the Arapahoe County Appraisal District. So we can maybe have some conversation with him offline. Unfortunately, we don't have a good direct connection to Medicare or any of those kind of agencies, but we can do our best to try to figure out the problem.
Great. Thank you, City Manager Lewis. Mr. Kelly, thank you for your continual engagement in the policy decision-making regarding the off-leash policy at our parks. This last review of the off-leash policy was one of the longest and most discussed and most residents surveyed in the history of the city with regard to off-leash policies. In the end, what we did is make minor changes to two parks, to Jason and Centennial. And these changes, as you will note, were much more minimal than what was suggested when our Parks and Rec department staff requested that council work to respond to and accommodate the needs and challenges and requests that were coming in large number from our citizens. I'll add one more piece, and I'll always add this. In this level of leadership, we can never please every single individual on every decision we make at the same time. Someone tends to be not pleased with some aspect of the decisions. However, as a council, we consistently strive toward advancing policy that always safeguards our constituents and that always provides them an enjoyable place to live and flourish. And so it is our intent. We believe we made very good compromise and tried to impact negatively the dog owners who enjoy the parks off leash, as well as non-dog owners who enjoy our parks. And so that's the position I have in response to your comments. And again, your opinion and your input and engagement is very much appreciated. Mr. Khan, City Manager Lewis, I might have to lean on you on this because what I believe I understand is that nothing has been done in 2 weeks, but I don't know nothing regards to what, and I know no details, so I can offer no insight. Can you?
I can do my best. Thank you, Member Wink. There was some confusion in my office in terms of how we responded. I think Mayor Olson was waiting to speak to me 2 weeks ago at the end of the meeting when Mr. Khan and I had a conversation. And I was under the impression that because he mostly worked days, that it was difficult for us to get in touch, and he would be in touch. He just explained to me before the meeting, no, he was expecting follow-up. So on the day that he did call Thursday, Public Works was able to send one of our inspectors out, Michael Wilson, and Mr. Wilson met with him. We are working to get a copy of his easement agreement with CenturyLink to review that for him, and just to see if the equipment that is on his property is in fact in the correct location, or if they've gone beyond. And then I believe Mr. Wilson also spoke to Mr. Khan about turning in, if we can't get some of the trash issues around his property cleaned up, that we would turn that into code enforcement. I did drop off a letter to Mr. Khan at his house on Friday evening, trying to explain our confusion that I created within our office, between my office and Public Works, and just letting him know that we would continue to help him as we were able. But we are a little bit limited in our ability beyond reviewing the agreement for him and just double checking that the equipment is where it needs to be, but we'll continue to try to assist him in that way, and I apologize for any confusion.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. So what I hear is that we have more than ample documentation showing that we have indeed, as a city, responded to Mr. Khan's requests and hand-delivered even a letter in response. So we are engaging, we are taking action, we have been. Sounds like there may have been a little gap in communication, but that we are tending to this citizen's request. So good. Thank you very much, City Manager Lewis. And to Ms. Colleen Dickerson, thank you for coming tonight. Regarding your request for this revision, I believe our legal authority should be the best to respond to this. And so I'm wondering if City Attorney Niles, you would be prepared at this moment sort of to respond, and I'm certain this would call for some follow-up as well, but would you like to respond to Ms. Dickerson about the legality behind, or precedent, or policy behind her request?
Certainly. As council recalls, we initially brought a resolution to City Council to establish the off-leash dog park regulations, and that resolution directed the city manager to create a park rule regarding it. And in that way, it would have fallen under Title 11, Chapter 4 park regulations. The City Council directed us instead to draft an ordinance for several reasons, both because then it would be written in municipal code what these park rules are, and that it would give the citizens a right to challenge the ordinance if enough citizens disagree with it. So we went back and wrote an ordinance, but instead we wrote it into the dog at large code, because municipal code prohibits dogs running at large. So the section of code then says, well, dogs can't run at large except during these times at these public places. The legal effect of doing that is the same. I believe we discussed that at a prior meeting, in that a violation for park rules has the same fine, the same response from the city prosecutor as a violation of the dog at large code. I believe it was a $150 fine, but the city prosecutor will dismiss if there's no violations in 6 months. So it has the same practical effect, but it is written in the dog at large code because the park rules are made by the city manager.
Excellent, Attorney Niles. Thank you so much for reviewing our previous decision-making and discussion, and for, yes, I think bringing a good resolution to Ms. Dickerson's question tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Wink. Appreciate your work on that tonight. That moves us on to agenda item 9, which are consent agenda items. And Councilmember Russell emailed this sometime today to remove or pull 9C1, C2, and C3. I believe. So that would leave the rest. Is there any others? Go ahead, Councilmember Russell.
I also would like to pull 9B1 in response to public comment tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I need a motion to approve 9B2, 9B3, 9B4, 9C4, 9C5, 9C6.
I move to approve 9B2, 9B3, 9B4, 9C4, 9C5, and 9C6.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Member Wink. All right, please vote.
Member Cuesta,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Mayor Olson.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. All right, moving back to 9B1. It says, staff recommends City Council approve an ordinance establishing park rules and regulations regarding off-leash dog privileges. And we'll let you lead this one, Member Russell, with your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So on 9B1 on the off-leash dog parks, City Attorney Niles, could we, I know you explained why we addressed it as we did. What would happen if council decided tonight to not vote this in? Could we put the rules in Title 11 for 2C?
We could. The way municipal code is currently drafted, the city manager makes the park rules. So it would require some slight wording changes to municipal code, but we could certainly move it there if that's council's preference.
So if by putting it where we did in Title VII, is it delineated what all the park rules are, or not necessarily? We're just addressing one issue. That's the dogs running at large.
Yes, as it is under Title VII. Title VII prohibits dogs running at large within the city. So this provides a written exception to that blanket prohibition. If we are going to address it in the park rules, we may also want to include a reference to the park rules in this municipal code. So we would want it to be consistent, but we certainly could.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve 9B1, Council Bill 49.
I move to approve 9B1.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Wink. Any further discussion? Councilmember Ward?
I just want to note that I agree with the placement of this in the section that it's in. This section of code is in regards to animals. We are making an exception to the city's ordinance regarding at-large animals, not a rule for our parks. The location of the exception happens to be our parks, but the exception applies to animals in the city, which is why it goes in the code on animals. In the definition, dog, cat, stray, or running at large on public property, I'll just read the current definition. Not under reasonable control and physically restrained by a capable person when or on public property or any public area by a leash, tether, or other physical device, with the exception of designated off-leash parks. That's in Chapter 7, or Title 7, or 71A1 is the section of code that's in. This is also the area that we are modifying to include the exceptions for specific parks during specific hours. This is where it fits. So that's why I'm in favor of placing it here.
All right, thank you. Member Russell?
Thank you, Mayor. In deference to Mr. Kelly and his concerns, I actually agree with everything you said. I greatly appreciate it. I know the frustration, and because of that, I am going to be voting no on changing this to an ordinance. The bottom line is City Council should be listening to the constituents And there was plenty of testimony, not just Mr. Kelly, from a lot of people. And so I appreciate your continued coming and speaking to us, and I thank you for that, and I will be voting no. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I guess we have a motion and a second. All right, well, please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 5 ayes and 1 nay, one nay being Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. On to 9C1. Staff recommends City Council approve by motion the annual contract with AEC West for building plan review and inspection services in the amount of $130,000. Councilmember Russell, I'll let you take this one with your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So my first question is, well, I can delineate them all, whichever is easier. So how many current inspectors does the building department employ?
We currently have 3 full-time inspectors, and we have a senior permit tech that is also a certified residential inspector.
Okay, thank you. And then how often does best practices say we need to reissue the RFP?
3 or 4 years, 5 years if services are reasonably valued and cost appropriate. However, the current procurement policy for the city does not require an RFP for professional services, but provides for an optimal source selection. AEC West has possessed the technical knowledge and experience to provide services and has a satisfactory record with the city, as well as a familiarization of city and projects and of the city. The RFP in 2019 showed AEC West to be competitive in pricing and services, and the contract presented today provides the same pricing for services as the 2019 RFP.
Thank you for that. And then if we are seeing an increase in large projects, is it necessary to hire more building inspectors?
Not at this time. So in 2020, we utilized the inspection services for 20 days total. That included a time period in which we were hiring a building inspector for a vacancy, when we had 2 inspectors out for COVID protocols, and also when we were looking for a new electrical inspector. This year, we've only used them 6 times for inspection services. So it's been mostly for plan review of large projects.
Okay, so we didn't nearly spend what we budgeted then, is that true also?
For 2020, we spent almost $116,000. For 2021, we are currently at $80,000. However, we are expecting a couple of big projects to possibly hit either this month or next month. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's one of those things we can't really predict exactly when they're going to submit.
Right. So, well, and if it if it doesn't hit, then if it doesn't hit till after the first of the year, then the remaining money that we approved
would just still stay in the city budget or in the city coffers.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I greatly
welcome.
appreciate those answers.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve 9C1. Could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Please vote. Or is there any further discussion, I guess, given that information? Seeing none, please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. 9C2 is contract extension between All Health Network and the City of Englewood. I'll let you ask your questions, Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. So the major question that I have, is it possible for the police department to provide City Council a matrix that delineates how effective this program has been over the last 3 years? Is there any way to measure that?
Thanks for allowing me to comment on that. That's kind of a moving target, to be frank with you. It's very difficult to give a quantitative analysis on a matrix for how successful it is on a behavioral health issue and how many people have we, I guess, quote unquote, helped, and to what level. What I can do is give you some overall numbers. Since January of 2020 is when All Health started what they call their co-responder dashboard to give us some very updated statistics. I can tell you that since January of 2020, we've had a total of 2,040 contacts with individuals from everything basing, the overwhelming majority of them were welfare checks and homeless contacts, suicidal individuals, and people with behavioral disturbances, as they call it. As you know, the goal for us with this non-traditional approach from the beginning with All Health and our co-responders has been to provide continuity of care and a level of mental health treatment that frankly our officers are not trained to do and that our mental health clinicians that we hire through All Health are. And I can tell you from my experience in being in this business for 27 years that this has been a game changer for us, not only for our citizens, but for our officers and the level of training that our officers are receiving, even informally on a daily basis, working with our co-responders, just the way that we're able to de-escalate and non-escalate incidents. It's just amazing. We average about 93 incidents a month that our co-responders are helping us with. And again, I've got just a ton of different numbers, but as far as successes and the amount of success, it's just a hard thing to quantify.
I appreciate that. That's understandable. So thank you for that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Pro Tem Steeri.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Chief Fender, for the explanation. Actually, I was going to save this for my council member's choice later on tonight, but I'll ask the question now. I've had a couple of conversations with citizens that have been afraid to call in the police department in terms of when they come encounter someone that's experiencing homelessness because they fear the policing aspect of it, not knowing what we're doing within the city to help individuals that are experiencing homelessness and all the support. I know that we passed something with Tri-City, and part of that's going to be a website and communication, but is there any way that we can communicate today some of the things that we're doing in terms of if citizens do come across anybody that's experiencing homelessness, these are actually our steps that we're taking so they can call 911 and it won't be a policing situation, maybe a mental health responder that does communicate with anybody that's experiencing homelessness?
Yes, sir. We can work with the city's communication department on that and see if we can get some word out on that. And as you all know, the route that takes is going to be a police officer responding with one of our co-responders, and then we also have, as you know, our 40-hour-a-week case manager, Brittany Golden, who that is her number one job is to work with us on homeless and getting homeless resources and follow up and doing the housing survey, the vulnerability index, and on all of that. So yeah, I can definitely work with Sergeant McGrath to see if we can get something put together for communications.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're ready to make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve 9C2, which is our contract extension between All Health Network and the City of Englewood for the amount of $262,707. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further discussion? Member Ward?
I did a ride-along a couple of months ago. And one of the things that I wanted to see was how this program was working. And I am very happy to spend $262,707 caring for the needs of the people of the city of Englewood using this method. Mental health is a huge challenge, one that I've had under my own roof, and they're doing good work out there. So I'm grateful for this program. I'm grateful for the resource that we're expending to fund this program, and I hope to see this program continue into the future.
Thank you. I also will speak up since it was pulled. Might as well take the time to say this is one of the game changers that I think the police have been so amazingly open to and adopted and made it even better than what it could have been. And it is also in line with what's happening in the mental health world right now. If anybody noticed, the governor actually has just propose some budget for youth in particular around mental health. And I think some of you who, when we were trying to make COVID decisions, were very concerned about the mental health of people through this and adamant that that be taken care of. So this is one way we do it through the city, and it's also other things coming down through the state that hopefully we can capitalize on to create a better community for people who are struggling at different times with different issues. So this also helps police not escalate things that we've seen in other cities where people are experiencing all kinds of diverse ways of handling life, sometimes get unfortunately into some unfortunate violent behavior that ends up needing to be subdued, and then force happens that we aren't really very happy about at the end. So I'm really pleased that we're doing this. I think the way to really encourage policing around this area is to continue to fund it at a level that makes sense with the number of people that we need, with the professionals that we need. So that's my bit on this, since it's my last time to talk about this. Very happy to see that we're going to have a great plan with Tri-Cities to help around this as well, which includes a lot of communication. So let's please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Agenda item 9C3 is removal of Englewood Housing Authority alternate member. Councilmember Russell, I'll let you kick off with your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. I really pulled this in the interest of openness and transparency, and I just have a couple of questions. Has the member been notified yet?
On behalf of the chair, the chair and Lindsay have contacted the member many times and gave him a second chance at the beginning of the year, and he still has not attended a meeting this year.
Okay, thank you. And then, so what process does the city follow when removing a member for lack of attendance, whether on the Housing Authority Board or any board and commission?
Per the board and commission policy, members who miss more than 60% of the meeting during an annual term may be removed upon recommendation of the chair of the board, commission, or committee, and action of the city council. And we did bring forward this in February for, I believe it was Transportation Committee. There was a member that was not attending meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve 9C3. Could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to 11C1. Folks, do you need a break before we move down to that, or would you like to continue on? Anybody need a break? Seeing no waving of hands, we will move on. 11C1 is a memorandum of understanding regarding the settlement of opioid litigation. Our staff recommends City Council approve a resolution approving this memo regarding the settlement, and our staff, City Attorney Tamara Niles, is online to help us understand it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. First of all, there is a PowerPoint on this matter that apparently was uploaded in the wrong format to iCompass, so it wasn't included in the packet. But it does include all of the information that was in the council item. So you do have all the information. We also just have it in a glossy format for you in a PowerPoint. This is an item that is a short turnaround time to approve the MOU to accept settlement funds for the entire state of Colorado through very long-standing multi-district litigation regarding the opioid crisis. So there's been quite a few different lawsuits. They've MDL, or multi-district litigation, is a procedural method whereby they're all addressed somewhat together. So this is the first of what we anticipate will be several settlements through the opioid litigation. The $26 billion for all of the states in the U.S. Will be paid over 18 years to resolve claims against the 3 biggest drug distribution companies and the manufacturer Johnson & Johnson. And I did provide in the PowerPoint a link, nationalopioidsettlement.com, if council would like to review more information regarding the national settlement regarding this matter. And I believe now we have a video prepared by the Attorney General regarding the settlement.
Over the last decade here in Colorado, nearly 5,000 Coloradans died from prescription opioid overdose. As Colorado Attorney General, I'm committed to addressing this opioid crisis. That's why we brought litigation against irresponsible actors in the pharmaceutical industry who hurt people by pushing out dangerous drugs.
I was prescribed 360 pills in a month period after I had gallbladder surgery. I was hooked. The doctors had cut me off, and I had gone to the streets to start buying pills. I lost my apartment. I lost my home. I lost my job. I was literally sleeping on the train tracks at the Fort Collins Rescue Mission. I had to get some clean time in me so that I could get into treatment. I went to go check myself into that treatment center, and I had like 27 days clean off of heroin at the time. And they turned me away.
Having done this for the last 10 years, it is so apparent to me that our system, while it is well-intended, and there are some parts of it that are really well-built, it isn't complete. We need greater access to treatment. There is no harder place to be than in a setting where the level of care that your patient needs is simply not available. We've had people die on our waiting lists.
There's a lot of shame and guilt, right? So a lot of people don't want to come out and talk about their story. My experience has been is you either have to have a lot of money to get into treatment or go cough up a bunch of felonies, and the justice system will put you in a treatment bed, and that's not okay.
Now, these companies are being held to account with $400 million coming to Colorado as long as we can get local governments on board. Please join us and stand together, signing this Memorandum of Understanding to give us twice the money that we'd otherwise get. It's going to give us an opportunity to do something critical, addressing opioid use disorder by providing more drug treatment, more drug recovery programs, and better education and prevention efforts.
What I can tell you now, after 40 years of law enforcement, is that if arrest, stigmatization, and incarceration worked with drug users, we wouldn't be here today. I'm excited at the prospect of actually seeing this cohesive effort come together and maybe make a real dent in this, because the problem is getting worse and worse and worse, and we've got to find a way to get it under control. When we do this together, we can save lives.
If everyone signs on to the agreement, there's no question that we can improve access to care and improve the quality of care that people are receiving.
Montrose County is signing on because we believe this is the right thing to do for our communities. And we're not going to waste time. We're going to get it done as soon as possible, but we're signing on because we believe in it.
Pueblo County is going to sign this agreement because we have waited long enough. We've seen enough suffering in our communities. We see these opioid settlement funds as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to put dollars back into the areas of our community that have been victimized by the opioid epidemic.
This settlement and the agreement are going to give us powerful tools to start regaining ground, because the human cost of this fight is real and it has been heartbreaking.
We've got a lot of work to do to address this crisis. Our office is committed to that important work, but we need your help. Let's sign this agreement now so we can begin the process of healing our state and communities and give people who need help the support they deserve.
I have a voice today. I get to help others in their recovery journey and tell them my story. People recover. People can be contributing members to society. Moms can be moms again. Dads can be dads again. People can be an effective part of the community again.
Let's do this together. To find out more, please go to coag.gov/opioids.
Okay. The way the settlement is structured, if we could go to the next slide in the PowerPoint.
I don't think that's it. Looks like Halloween. There we go.
Okay. So the way this is structured, thank you, Stephanie. The way this is structured is the entire multi-billion-dollar settlement was for the entire United States, and then each state with representatives of local governments such as the Colorado Municipal League and their Attorney General. Each created their own MOU and negotiated it. So the Colorado MOU it gives 80% of the money from the settlement directly to local governments. The state will retain 20% for separate things, but the vast majority of it is going directly to local governments to address various crises caused by opioid addiction. So we anticipate this will be the first of multiple settlements that will provide funding to Englewood and Arapahoe County to address issues regarding opioid addiction and to mitigate its effects. The receipt of funds, I believe the video went into this, is contingent upon 95% of Colorado local governments approving the MOU and related agreements. If so, the preliminary numbers we received said the state is projected to receive $300 million. The video said $400 million. So then we're saying $300 to $400 million. We'll certainly accept the extra $100 million. The next slide describes the MOU, and as I already stated, gives 80% of settlement funds to local governments. And then it is intended to apply to all future opioid settlements as well. Now, this will not be the only time this comes to City Council. Before you tonight is a resolution to approve the MOU and related documents regarding the settlement, but then we have to decide what we're going to do with that money. And we'll also have an ordinance regarding an intergovernmental agreement with our region. So this is just the very first step. As I stated previously, 80% goes to local governments, 20% directly to the participating local governments. And this is on the next slide of the PowerPoint. 60% goes directly to regions, and our region is Region 9, which consists solely of Arapahoe County. Then 10% goes directly to state, and then 10% goes to state infrastructure projects. So 20% to statewide, and then 80% to local governments and regions. The settlement funds must be used only for approved purposes. If you would like to read exactly what those are, it's Exhibit A to the MOU, which is in your packet. Very long and detailed list of things that can be used with the settlement funding. It applies to prevention, treatment, harm reduction, training healthcare providers, treatment, responsible prescribing, et cetera, et cetera. It's very extensive as to how the money can be used. So here's the categories that allow it. It can go to our criminal justice, people in treatment recovery, misuse, also goes to first responders. It can go to community leadership, research, and then a portion of it can also go to city administrative costs. As shown on a prior slide, 20% of the settlement funds are paid directly to participating local governments. The Exhibit D to the MOU in the packet establishes that Arapahoe County will receive 10.8071% of the 20% that goes to local governments. Of that, the City of Englewood is designated to receive 5.580%. So doing the math, based on a $300 million distribution to the state of Colorado, this would equal a little over $362,000 directly to Englewood, should we choose to expend the funds ourselves. And then just for the council's reference, I provided the distributions to the other cities in Arapahoe County so you can see where Englewood falls into those distributions. And that continues on the next slide as well, where I also included Englewood's share. So what happens if we don't participate? So the City of Englewood has not previously participated in the litigation. We did not participate in the negotiation of the MOU. If we don't participate now, the city won't receive funds from the settlement. Then if more than 5% of Colorado local governments choose not to participate, this says the state of Colorado would receive no settlement funds. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at a different version than what's on the screen now. We had corrected this. If the more than 5% of the state does not participate, then it will be significantly reduced. It won't be the entire $300 to $400 million. Then if the city chooses not to participate, the city could file its own separate litigation and independently pursue its claims. I do not recommend that at all. Instead, I believe that our resources and our people are best served by approving the MOU. So to participate and funnel these funds, these $300,000 to the city of Englewood, the resolution in front of you authorizes executing the MOU, executing the 2 participation agreements in the settlement with both Johnson & Johnson and then the big 3 distributors. And it also authorizes execution of an escrow agreement whereby the funds would come into the state and the state would be allowed to hold them until it distributes the funds. So we are not required to decide at this moment if we are going to implement our own programs, provide annual report regarding expenditures, or if we want to give our share to the regional authority. Excuse me. We could transfer our funds to the regional authority to implement the required uses for the entire county, and of course also benefit Englewood in that process. But that's not a decision we're making at this time. Instead, the action required, this is a short timeline. The Attorney General's Office requested the executed documents no later than November 5th, 2021. We received the documents with less than a month to present this to City Council, so this was a short timeline on our end as well.
Thank you. And I see questions. So Councilmember Ward will start.
Did I read correctly that this is a multi-year settlement, or is that $300,000 expected to come in a lump sum?
No, it's a multi-year settlement. If memory serves, it's over 18 years to pay the entire $26 billion. So it's not something we'll get all at once.
Okay, so the $300,000 would be theoretically divided over 18 years, or it's $300,000 per year for 18 years?
No, it would be divided over the 18 years.
Okay, thank you.
So for that reason, because we don't have a lump sum, we may want to consider just joining in a regional effort for the expenditure of funds. But again, that's a conversation we'll have at a later date.
Others? No questions? Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. So if Englewood decided to spend the money ourselves, who would administer that?
The city would have to set up the administrative scheme to do that. There's also reporting requirements. We have to make assurances that we're using the funds appropriately. So that's something we would have to set up, establish, regulate, monitor, and report.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wink has her hand raised.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, City Clerk. City Attorney Niles, so our not participating in the MOU previously, did that decision-making happen prior to your joining our leadership team in Englewood?
Yes. This has been ongoing for some time. It's been a long negotiation. And so it was something that had never crossed my desk or not crossed my desk to consider participation until this moment.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. No more questions? All right. Could I have a motion to approve our resolution of Memorandum of Understanding regarding the settlement of opioid litigation?
I move to approve 11C2.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Ward. Any discussion?
Is it 11C1? I just want to...
You're correct. It's 11C1.
Okay.
All right. I am really thankful that this has come through. I am hopeful that we will be seeing more money with more suits going forward. The mayors have been talking about this together for a while and figuring out what the percentages might be. Others were involved in negotiating how much it was. I'm pleased to see the percentage for Englewood. It's much higher than others, if you noticed. So I think it would be foolish not to accept this and then decide how we want to use it with some regional strategy or tri-city strategy or something like that that would make the most of the money and make it usable for a larger population. So that would be my take on it. Any other comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Then 11C2 is our economic partnership agreement between the City of Englewood and Englewood Chamber of Commerce. And here tonight to help us understand this agreement, which is an economic partnership agreement in the amount of $20,000 annually, our Staff Director of Community Development, Brad Power, and Economic Manager, Darren Hollingsworth, and Executive Director of the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce, David Carroll, are all here to help us understand this. Thank you and welcome.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of City Council. Darren Hollingsworth, Economic Development Manager. I'm also joined by David Carroll, Executive Director of the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce. We're happy to respond to any questions that Council may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council, questions for them tonight? This is something we have talked about. It's been part of the budget that we've, Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. So on the, it's said that the City of Englewood is ensuring that, well, no, that's, how much do we anticipate the fees for the permits to be?
Councilmember Russell, I do believe that the fees are event-related. I'm happy to ask David to respond to that directly, but event-related and event-specific. So any indirect costs like that, the city would waive, but the direct cost, if there was to be, for example, a street closure or a police overtime, that would be something that the event would carry, not the city.
I can add a little bit to that in just asking Director of Public Works how much a street closure permit, which would be a pretty common event, she thinks is about $25, but we can double check that and let you know exactly.
Okay, but street closure events would be paid for by the chamber, right?
Well, typically whoever is hosting the event would take out those permits and pay for those. So in this case, as part of the agreement, and this is a kind of a common setup in economic development agreements in other cities, that if you are a partner organization, your fees are waived.
Okay, and then my other question is, how much do we anticipate the advertising will cost for all of this?
Just to clarify, is that advertising for events? For the
yes,
events?
well, right. It says in the packet, it talks about says the city will recognize the chamber's contribution to jointly sponsored events and programs through promotion and signage. And then there was something else about advertising. I'm assuming that there will be articles in the Englewood Citizen magazine and also mailers.
Typically, what we would do with a partner in this case is share their logo on any advertising, and vice versa. So if the chamber's sponsoring an event and the city are co-sponsoring that event, we share logos, et cetera. So that takes place in our existing social media marketing and things of that nature. I don't think this is a direct sort of marketing line item necessarily. David, if you wish to expand, but that's my understanding of what that intent is to co-brand the event with the city's logo and the chamber's logo.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councilmember Ward.
I just have one question regarding the resolution. And this may be a question for the city attorney's office, but the second to last whereas clause, whereas the city will provide $20,000 annually for a 3-year period, etc. The contract contains a tabor clause, but I'm a little concerned that we didn't include the tabor clause in the resolution.
I'm not sure if we ever have. City Attorney Niles, did you hear that?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
The city is protected by including the tabor clause in the contract. So the whereas clause provides background, but it's not a legally binding statement. So the contract provision would prevail.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, could I have a motion to approve 11C2?
I move to approve 11C2.
Thank you. I'll second it. Discussion. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be supporting this. I have said at every meeting from the beginning since this all happened, The chamber's direction is totally different than the ACE Committee's direction. The chamber is to represent the businesses of the city, and they get, there's membership fees. The businesses in the city that do not join the chamber, I do believe there will be a huge conflict of interest, and that this is not a wise partnership to enter into. So thank you very much.
All right, are there others? Seeing none, or any further comments? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem. No? All right, I think this is a great move on our part, and I think we've got this 3-year safety net built into it. If things aren't going well, it can change. It's very, very, very tiny, small amount of money to actually jumpstart something that I think could really be very significant for the city. So I'll be voting yes. So let's please vote.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 5 ayes and 1 nay, the 1 nay being Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. Next is 11C3. Thank you for coming tonight, too. 11C3 is our contract for custodial services. The staff recommends that City Council approve by motion a contract with Regal Facility Management to provide custodial services in the city's facilities in the amount of $448,788. And our Director of Public Works, Maria DeAndrea, and Deputy Director Operations and Maintenance, Chris Edelstein, and Building Services Supervisor, Jeff Wenda. Did I massacre your names? I hope not. All right, thanks for being here.
That was great. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll just briefly introduce this. We do have a brief PowerPoint to show you tonight that Chris will be going over. So this has come at a significant effort over the last several months for us to go through an RFP process to solicit custodial services. So as the council knows, we have been working with a contract service to kind of backfill for some vacant positions, and now we're moving more in that direction for the upcoming year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So as Maria said, we're here to discuss the awarding of a contract for custodial services. The contractor would be providing day porter services and custodial services for the following facilities: the Civic Center, the Recreational Center, Malley Center, the Service Center, Pirates Cove, the Golf Course, South Platte Renew, and also Allen Water Treatment Plant. We would continue to provide service to the police department with internal city staff. We'd also conduct specialized services with our staff and also room setups. Here's a quick facility location map. This does show all of the 8 locations plus the police department for all 9. So with the selection process, we did put a request out for proposals. We did have a non-mandatory walkthrough with those contractors that were interested in providing a bid for this work. We were lucky enough to receive 11 proposals. Of those 11 proposals, we did take a further look at 5 of those firms. We did check their references, did additional supplemental information from them as well. With that, we did determine that Regal Facilities was selected for providing the best service and value to the city. As Maria has mentioned, that we are currently using Regal for the contract custodial services right now with the city for supplemental services. With that, the financial implications: the base service is $432,648. We do have some quarterly services built into the contract as well for $9,140. And we're also asking for a contingency of $7,000 for any of the small items that might not have been spelled out in the contract that we would still need assistance with throughout the year. This is a 1-year contract from November 2nd, 2021 through November 1st of 2022. We do have 2 additional 1-year periods to extend this contract. The existing contract with Regal would be extended through November 1st of 2021, and then the salary savings would be utilized to cover. So as Maria stated, we'd be reducing the size of our in-house staff due to vacancies, and moving that down from a staff of 13 down to the current staff of 4. With that, staff recommends that the City Council approve a contract with Regal Facility Management for custodial services at the city facilities listed in an amount of $448,788. And with that, we'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for these? Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. So why are employees leaving the city, especially janitors?
We've lost them through a variety of reasons. So our pay rate, but others have gone on. There's several that have gone on to other positions, either within the city, and at more in line with what their overall career advancement plans are. So we did have one who went into our meter reading position. There are several others who have taken other positions, again, in line more with what their long-term career needs are. We have not had any leave who were, I think, dissatisfied with their current conditions of work, more again, just that they were looking for other opportunities.
Who will be checking on the work performed by whoever gets the RFP?
Yeah, so as the building service supervisor, I'd be going behind the contractors and be conducting monthly inspections at each facility.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions for now.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation. I have a series of questions, so I'll ask them in succession here. So how many FTEs do we have previously within janitorial services?
We had 12 staff members and 1 lead.
Okay, so we had 13 total. What was our average pay rate for each of those service average?
I believe we were between roughly $15 and $16 per hour.
Okay, and that was previous, was that $2020 or is that 2021 earlier this year?
That's also, I believe, the current.
Okay. So 1550, there was 13 total. What are in terms of this contract, are we going to see like a decrease in service hours, or are we going to see better coverage? Just curious.
Yeah, we have done that analysis. So the benefit of bringing on a contract is that we only pay for the hours actually where they're here servicing our facilities. So with our custodial staff, we pay for overtime, we pay for paid leave, we pay for sick time, holidays. And so we do feel that this is an increased level of service in terms of number of hours provided.
Okay. So I'm just doing the math here. So for 2,000 hours for 13 employees at $15 an hour, we're looking at $390,000. So we are looking at a little bit of an increase in terms of annual cost for janitorial services. Am I understanding that correctly?
What you also have to take into consideration, besides just the hourly rate, is also the benefits that the city pays. So, which is a significant cost. And we have done that analysis. We can provide that if you'd like. But adding that in does result in that we're pretty close, if not actually saving dollars on this contract.
Those benefits are about 30%. That's what we average for all employees.
Okay, so we're looking at about 50,000 per person, I guess, in a sense, per FTE, somewhere around there, 50 or so.
I think we were, I did the math. I think we were around 54 to 55,000 per employee.
Okay, no, I appreciate all the information. I do understand the reasoning behind this. I know that many industries are now struggling with hiring people. I'm seeing it a lot in manufacturing, as that's the work that I do. So I do appreciate the information and getting ahead of this. Actually, last question. This is just a one-year contract, so if things do change in the market and we look to bring that back in-house, that is an option for us, correct?
That is very much an option, and we're set to do a kind of a mid-year review, so in about 6 months, see how they're performing both on quality and responsiveness, and then again, right before we would renew it for an additional year, if we did choose to do that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? I guess I have one. So the companies that the RFPs that this would go to, do they give them, sorry, she also has her hand up, thank you. Do they, sorry, do they give vacation and personal days off in their system, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know if we have an indefinite answer to that, but what I do know is that anytime any of them, the contractors would need time off, that they have subs and they have rovers that would fill in for any absences for them.
Actually, I'm not worried about the absences. I'm worried about people being not paid to the level that they should be, as well as not getting the kind of personal time that people have to live a healthy life. So we don't know that. Can that be a part of this? I just really don't want to exacerbate a situation of lower paid professionals or, folks, and then not have them really get what they need.
Yeah, that's definitely something we could look into and get back with.
Okay. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much to our Public Works team for this presentation tonight. I remember us talking about this previously, and I think this is the absolute best decision, best way forward. So the detail is on point. Your research, of course, is on point. I appreciate it, and I'm fully supportive of this.
All right, are there any other questions? Because if not,
sorry,
Member Wink, maybe you can make the motion. I don't see any questions, so go ahead.
I move to approve agenda item 11C3, contract for custodial services in city facilities.
All right, thank you. Could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Discussion. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you very much. I have some grave concerns, and my concerns are, I believe that probably Public Works staff has decided this is the direction we're going, and there probably has been some pressure on people. I've heard things. And so us sitting up here and saying a year from now we can go back, that is not the plan. The plan is to take us out and contract everything, and I am opposed to that, and I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mayor Pro Tem Steeri.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be in support of the custodial services. I appreciate Director Public Works providing us feedback in terms of the reasoning behind it, but I do share the concerns of the mayor in terms of the quality of life and potentially some of those issues. So I like for staff to keep an eye on whether or not lower pay, maybe less benefits for those that we're going to be using for custodial services. That does concern me, but in terms of what we're seeing in the market today, we'll be supporting this today. Thank you.
All right, are there others?
Mayor, could I make
Go
one
ahead.
comment? Thank you, Mayor. I do want to just say that when I first arrived here, one of the questions that I asked is, why are we not on contract custodial? So this is something that I think Public Works has very wisely crept into as a decision, as we've seen vacancies. I appreciate Director DeAndre's sensitivity, but we did lose one person to death. We also have had to terminate some employees. So there has not been a mass exodus, but rather you've seen some contracts come to council where we are increasing the contract services. That's because I think Director DeAndre and her staff have been really strategic in backfilling when we do have a vacancy with a contractor to really meet my organizational goal of cost savings as well as efficiency and really get us to where we are today, where we're not having to lay off anyone in going to this contract.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I've worked with a number of organizations, nonprofits, public and private, and my current place where we've gone both ways, where we have our own staff doing this and we've contracted out. Each of them is different in the way it works out. My thing all along has been make sure that we're paying them at a price that gives them a livable wage and has a quality of life with vacation and days off. And if we can secure that, I think great, then let's try this. So that would be a key for me though. But I will be supporting it tonight. Hopefully it'll work out well. And the Great Resignation is occurring everywhere. So the question of why are people leaving the city? All of us are asking that in every single segment of employment right now. And I'm trying to figure out what are people going to do? Some people are not working at all because they're choosing to have time off. All right, so A motion, and I guess we've had a second. Let's please vote.
Member Cuesta.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wink.
Aye.
Mayor Olson.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes and 1 nay, the 1 nay being Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. Next is our general discussion. I'm gonna skip to council members' choice because we have an item here as well. So proposed historic preservation ordinance discussion. I'm not sure who is, I think Member Cuesta, are you the one bringing this forward tonight or talking to it?
We briefly discussed it last week when I was visiting remotely. I did not request that it be added this evening. I'm more than happy to go over it if anybody would care to.
Manager Lewis, this is the email that you sent us and forwarded to us. That is the background information for this, right? So
It is. Thank you, Mayor. And my apologies, Member Cuesta. I thought when you were remoting in that you were saying, can we put this on the agenda? So my apologies for that. And so I did put that on the agenda under this section. But essentially, I was presented with a letter from the Historic Preservation Commission asking for the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which provides protections to our landmark buildings as well as districts potentially if that's approved. Just asking that be fast-tracked. And so I tried to lay out some pros and cons in an email to you all about this. Just in terms of, the pros being, it would certainly provide protections for those buildings earlier, and also that this is not really a regulatory process as much as it is a tool to let people landmark their properties or landmark a district if enough neighbors kind of sign on to that. On the con side, you have, and actually some council members, in fact, Member Anderson expressed to me, I'm afraid that might not be consistent as we've told other residents that we're going to hold off on, the bulk plane discussion. We're going to hold off on the rezoning for tattoo parlors in certain zoning districts because we're going to lump all of that together in the Code Next project or the Title 16 Next project. So that, as well as staff really just feeling like we might have better public input if we're really rolling a lot of these things out at once. So staff is recommending that you hold off on that, but we certainly are ready and willing to take council's direction with regard to fast tracking this ordinance.
all right. So I may have conflicted it may have confused it last week too, because I was talking about Arapahoe Acres and their need to, and I wasn't on the mayor manager agenda sitting this week either. I had an emergency, I couldn't do it. But what had been told to citizens in that area in the past 10, 11 years that I've been on was different than what is being interpreted now. And so my little questioning back and forth with city manager was dealing with the past information and realizing, oh, it's not interpreted that way anymore. And this is the process that needs to happen, pointing to this email. So I tend to agree with staff and with Member Anderson that I'm not sure, I think this should be done all together, but I'm really nervous about Arapahoe Acres not having some preservation, some way to preserve, because houses are for sale there, and there's concern about what will happen. But I'm not even sure we can go quick enough with that, so. But anyway, Member Cuesta.
If I were to have more time on council, which I don't, I would say that this might be worthy of a brief study session just to kind of flesh out those pros and cons during something more formal. I certainly get the perspective that we haven't prioritized one particular issue over another, and we've had others come forth that certainly that need attention as well. And is there something that makes this one more deserving? Arapahoe Acres always seems to be the showcase and where potentially some sort of preservation could be put into place. But I've been hearing that conversation almost as long as I've been on council too, and I'm sure you've probably been hearing it for longer than I have. So is there an urgency now? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess circling back to where I started, I feel I've got a foot out the door, and so it's tough for me to dictate what another council should be doing. I do think it's a worthy conversation if, though, there was another council willing to take it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this would be a question for the city manager or the city attorney, but if this was something that we were going to provide basically we would say it would be just an exception to the rule. Would this still have to go through planning and zoning and just a lot of different steps since it is a Title 16 change? Because I'll let you answer since I may have more on that.
Well, I'll give an answer, and then the city attorney's office can give an answer too. Typically, if it is being incorporated into Title 16, council would have a recommendation from planning and zoning. However, you have created a specific board, the Historic Preservation Commission, that essentially serves as your advisory body on matters related to historic preservation. So I think it would be perfectly acceptable for you to take the recommendation that I believe, Member Cuesta can correct me, it has already been made to council to approve this ordinance, and so now it's kind of just on hold until Title 16 comes forth. So you have a recommendation from a board or commission, but certainly you could remand or ask that it be reviewed by P&Z as well.
Are you finished?
I am finished. I'm going to have to noodle on that for a second.
Right,
Thank you.
that's right. Councilmember Russell and then Member Cuesta, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually do believe that it would be worthwhile to bring this forward in a study session just to discuss the pros and cons, because I don't believe it's only Arapahoe Acres. I think there is a overlay district. I think there are other people that live in architecturally historic homes that it would impact also. And I believe that it might be a good idea to get this on the agenda sooner before we complete the Title 16, because Title 16, if we did that first, may nullify anything that we wanted to do here. So.
Councilmember Cuesta.
I'm glad to hear that there's maybe a little bit of support for this going to a study session. I would like to mention that it sounds as though a recommendation has come forth from the HPC, and I think that their heart is really in it, and they've spent a fair amount of work on it. I would just like to say they might not be a bad voice to have in the conversation during a study session if this were to come before the next council. And I just wanted to thank the city manager for bringing this forward. Sounds like we had a bit of a communication, but I appreciate you being proactive on it. I think it's a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to speak up a bit on behalf of Arapahoe Acres. I know they come up all the time and people think, well, there's other neighborhoods too, and there are. This one particularly has a state designation, and I think that's what is so unique about it. And for that reason, they sometimes think that they're protected and they're not. With that designation. So I think, yeah, I think figure out whether in the new council you have enough to put it on a wider study and go from there.
Mayor, I believe Councilmember Wink has a.
I cannot see a hand. And, there, it's in the wood there. Okay, you have the
doesn't
most
show up
busy,
very
wonderful. Yeah. All right, it's down. All right, I think we'll leave it at that then. City manager, you know what to do with it after maybe the first of the year to get it back on, whoever's left. And then, did you have more?
Actually, I'm not sure if we did provide clear direction for the city manager on
maybe
this,
not.
but I would be happy to bring this back up when the new council sits in November, whether it's the 15th or soon thereafter. But I do think that we should have a communication about this with the new council.
Thank you. We didn't. So let's hear from Member Ward and Member Wink as well.
I think there are 3 members present tonight who are guaranteed to have their seats next week, and those should be the ones who make the decision on the agenda going forward.
Or when you all gather, whoever it is in December decides as well. Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
And I guess my statement was, let's bring it back as a council member's choice during the next meeting when the new council is sitting, and then we'll decide whether or not to bring it back as a study session item.
There you go. Member Wink, do you want to weigh in too?
That seems fair. I do want to have the conversation. So.
All right. Thank you. There you go. Now you've got full direction. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Council member's choice. Let's continue on. Who wants to start? Anybody have anything tonight? Go ahead, Member Cuesta.
I have my ballots in the car. Just a friendly reminder for everybody to turn in their ballots if they have not yet. Thank you, Mayor.
By 7 p.m. tomorrow.
Thank you. Member Ward, I think is your line. Yeah.
We had a council request regarding the 5G tower discussion that we had, and the staff memo indicates that the tower will not be going in Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Ward, that's our understanding from AT&T representatives, that they are looking for an alternate site, most likely on an existing utility pole or somewhere that's less adjacent to a residential home.
Okay, so we don't have a guarantee that that's what they will be doing, but that's what they've indicated.
That's
that
what
they
they've
plan.
indicated so far.
So no timeline on when the site will be cleaned up then?
No.
Okay, that would be the next step in my opinion, is to
Yes.
figure out when they intend to clean up that mess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it tonight, Member Ward?
That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, same here. So yeah, tomorrow's voting day. Please get your ballots in. It's a very important day to me. So too late to mail. Get them in by 7 o'clock, as the city clerk stated. And lastly, I do want to acknowledge the last full meeting of both of you, of the mayor and Council Member Cuesta. I'll have more to say during the November 15th meeting, but this is your last full meeting. So thank you very much for your service over your 4 years and your 12 years, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it felt different coming here tonight. It did. Anybody else have anything? No? Member Russell, nothing? Member Cuesta, nothing? Okay. I do have just two things. One I already just mentioned a little bit. I just wanted to read I think this is really important news, especially if you know young people who are struggling mental health-wise and financially struggling to actually get any help and care. Apparently, the decision by the governor is to provide connect youth to free counseling sessions, up to 3 of them. 3 free counseling sessions for Coloradans ages 18 and younger, or 21 and younger for those receiving special education services. And youth and their parents can visit, and there's a platform on the state website now where people can connect in and find out where they can get the behavioral health care that they need. It's been a major obstacle for young people in particular. Not a lot of healthcare providers do that well, or it's really expensive. The second thing is that I hate to talk about COVID because it seems like we've been able to be a little COVID-free, but there are some increases in the state. And I had a couple of people who know police officers who and their families who were out 6. I think you said we had 13 that were out during the course of 2 weeks, which was very alarming to people and asking, how can we have that many people out? What are we doing to make sure people are safe, as well as the police? So do you have any update on that and what we're doing? I think most people understand there are just some that will not get vaccinated, but also that puts others in harm's way. So what are we doing to make sure we're protecting everyone?
Right, thank you, Mayor. And we have surveyed the organization in terms of vaccine levels. Our surveys indicate about an 85% vaccination rate. I don't know that that has gone up significantly since we did that survey a month or so ago. But a couple of things specific to the police department, which I think you're asking about specifically. You know that we are still maintaining our mask mandate for all staff within buildings and really making sure that that's adhered to. In the police department, they are, Chief Watson, I spoke to him about this, and he did indicate that they are still requiring distancing. They have remote Teams meetings as an option and are encouraging that. All meetings are held with distancing requirements when they are in person. No 2 persons are allowed per car unless it's an officer in training. They are doing, with the help of the custodial staff, extra care with cleaning and disinfecting. And they do have the work from home option that's available to employees that are mostly the civilian employees in the police department. They've got the glass separations and workstations in dispatch where they're a little more in close proximity to each other. They've limited visitors. They're really not doing tours anymore right now. They've limited visitors altogether in PD. They have restricted officers from going into dispatch unless it's really necessary. No passengers or ride-alongs in the vehicles have been allowed in some time now. And it's any police department employee that shows any symptoms is sent home, tested, is required, I believe. This just says they are tested. And then if there is a positive test, they're following all the protocols, and the supervisors and managers are instructed really to monitor this for compliance. So I appreciate the question. We are trying to remain diligent, but that was a case where we were really shorthanded as a city as a result of that outbreak. We're glad to say that we have not had an outbreak in other departments, particularly since we went on the mask mandate, and that outbreak was one of the items that prompted the mask mandate with employees, and we've been in better shape since then, I would say. So.
Thank you for the update. I did give him an alert that I was going to ask this tonight so that he could have it at his fingertips. I think the public wants to know. It's good for it to be out there in the public of what we're doing if we're not going to have a vaccination mandate. So thank you. Anything else from council? No? All right. On to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to do a little of what the Mayor Pro Tem was saying and add on a few things to that. And that is my thanks to this council, your last full meeting as a council, my second council to serve with. And I just wanted to highlight a few things that just in the last year and a half that you all have been able to do. Particularly during the budget seasons, I've been, and I know I can speak for all staff, very thankful for this council's focus on continuing to employ our staff, continuing to pay staff to not require furlough days unless absolutely necessary. As you know, we budgeted for 4, but because of how good revenue has been this year, we only had to take 1 of those. That's been really critical for, I think, employee morale. And also just development and implementation of the city's strategic plan and updating that. You made another update on that tonight. Investments in sewer, road, water, stormwater infrastructure, really unprecedented, both in terms of your willingness to give us the resources and in the form of fees to make the necessary improvements, recognizing that we had a major problem and then taking really strong action to do that, but also really pushing staff to say, explain this to our residents. And so our communications team, I think at your direction, has really been aggressive in trying to communicate those changes. Through the unassigned fund balance, which we have spent down for the first time in a number of years, you've invested in all those things, plus parks. And those park renovations, unfortunately, design takes longer than we would like, but those are getting underway now with some of those parks. During COVID, you really pushed staff. I remember the first time that I told the mayor and Member Russell about, we're thinking about, this $500 grant. And I think the mayor chuckled and said, that's all. And so we really went back to the drawing board and kept going for more money, and we continued rolling those grants out. A former council member that was part of this council originally was a really driving force behind us providing the rental assistance program, and all of you supported that. So you all were really driving the bus and pushing staff to do really great work, I think, in the COVID response that we had. You also give us the resources necessary to really focus on asset management. You made that part of the strategic plan as well. The development of a sustainability plan, our first, and creation of the sustainability program as part of this budget. Obviously, the off-leash dogs was not a fun conversation, but you should, I hope, take pride in the fact that you did direct staff to do a very thorough, very vetted, very surveyed, and input-oriented process that has resulted in some key changes. And then, obviously, hiring our great city attorney, who's put together a great staff, including Kate, that's here tonight. And then, last but not least, I'll just close. Much of the work that this council did was what went into our application for the All-America City. I'm sorry we couldn't deliver a win on that, but certainly the programs with COVID response, with police reform, work that we did, just all the things that went into our application were really things that this council drove. So I want to personally thank you for your leadership to the community during this time. As a reminder, the last council meeting next week will be held. It'll be your council, retreat. It's going to be your orientation for new members, but we would love to have all outgoing council members at that too. We've asked Mayor Olson to do the same presentation she did 2 years ago on successful habits of councils, but otherwise it'll be staff presenting really key information for the new council members, but a good reminder for all of you as well. We'll also be giving out the Council Resource Guide, which is the notebook that has a lot of information for you as a resource. The last thing I'll mention is our strategic plan and the retreat. We are going to bring in December kind of a revamped structure for the strategic plan. What we've found as we are doing goal setting, for next year, is that many of our departments, thinking about Parks and Rec specifically, are very under-addressed in your strategic plan. And so we want to take a more comprehensive look at the organization, look at the work that we're doing, and make sure that it's represented in that plan. So we are planning on potentially consolidating infrastructure sections. Infrastructure and transportation, and then creating a new section, maybe quality of life or something or community amenities. We'll let you decide the name. That'll really cover a lot of those things that are happening in parks and recreation, in our educational kind of components of recreation that we're doing, because that's really a missing piece of the plan. And then do get some public input after you all kind of give us feedback on the revamped organization of the plan and some new goals, and then get some feedback to lead into the new council's new council's retreat, and that'll be in January. So we're looking at January 22nd or 29th. We'll try to get council, as soon as we have the election results, we'll get that on everyone's calendar for a council retreat on the 22nd or 29th to really dig into, finalizing the new strategic plan. But we're really excited about that work and excited about the opportunity to have conversations with the community about it. Any questions I can answer?
Any questions? Member Wink? I didn't miss you earlier, did I, in the council member's choice? Okay, good. All right, it looks. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem. You have the floor.
Nothing to what you just stated, City Manager, but you did remind me, and since I don't look a week out in my calendar, I do want to thank all those that have served a happy Veterans Day. So I just wanted to state that since we're going to be out next week, and November 11th is Veterans Day. So thank you all for serving, and thank you for your service.
Great recognition. Thanks for remembering that. We moved our Tri-Cities policy meeting because of that to a Tuesday instead of that Thursday. All right, so humor me, it's my last one to do this, really. So consent vote, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
nays? Seeing none, we are adjourned.